What my grandson didn't know was that I had been watching him for the past 6 months. And tonight, at my retirement celebration, I finally understood why. I smiled as I raised my glass of bourbon, the one that was supposed to be mine, the one he had just poisoned. Let me back up. My name is Robert Mitchell, and 3 months ago, I sold my medical device company for $72 million. 43 years of 18-hour days, missed birthdays, and cold dinners finally paid off. My wife Sarah had died 2 years earlier, and I'd thrown myself into work to cope with the grief. When the acquisition finally closed, I was 74 years old, exhausted, and alone in a house too big for one person. My grandson Trevor was 31. He'd always been my favorite, if I'm being honest. Bright kid, graduated from Stanford with a computer science degree, had that entrepreneurial fire I recognized in myself. For the past 5 years, he'd been working on some kind of AI startup. I didn't fully understand it, but he was passionate about it, and I respected that. After Sarah died, Trevor started visiting more often. Every Sunday, like clockwork, we'd have lunch, talk about his company, and he'd help me with things around the house. It felt good to have family around again. My daughter, Lisa, Trevor's mother, lived in Seattle with her husband. We talked on the phone, but the distance made regular visits impossible. The first red flag came 4 months ago. I was in my study, reviewing some documents my financial advisor had sent over about estate planning, when Trevor let himself in through the front door. He had a key for emergencies. "Grandpa?" he called out. In the study, he appeared in the doorway, holding a bag from our favorite deli. Brought lunch, pastrami on rye, extra pickles, just how you like it. "You're a good kid," I said, moving some papers aside to make room on my desk. As we ate, I noticed his eyes kept drifting to the documents I'd been reading: estate planning, trust structures, beneficiary designations. His smile never wavered, but something shifted in his expression, something I couldn't quite place. "Big decisions?" he asked casually, gesturing to the papers. "Just making sure everything's in order. You know, at my age, you don't want to leave a mess for the people you love?" "Of course." He took a bite of his sandwich. "Have you decided how you're going to structure things?" The question felt off. Not inappropriate exactly, but premature, pushy. I changed the subject, and we finished lunch talking about his company. He mentioned he was having trouble with his Series B funding round. Investors were getting cold feet about the AI market. He needed $8 million to keep the lights on for another 18 months. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something about that conversation bothered me. The second red flag came 6 weeks later. Trevor had invited me to his apartment in Palo Alto for dinner. He'd hired a private chef, made a whole production of it. During the meal, he started talking about a retreat he'd been on in Big Sur. Something about mindfulness and clarity. You know what the facilitator said that really stuck with me? Trevor poured me another glass of wine. She said that sometimes the people who love us most can't see when we're not ourselves anymore. When we're declining, I set down my fork. Declining? Just in general, Grandpa. It's natural. My point is, there's no shame in getting help, in letting other people make decisions when things get too complicated. Trevor, I just closed a $72 million sale. My lawyers and accountants tell me my mind is sharper than executives half my age. He held up his hands. Of course, I didn't mean you specifically. I'm just saying, theoretically, if someone started showing signs of confusion or memory issues, the loving thing would be to step in, take over the finances, make sure they're protected. Protected from what? From people who might take advantage. From bad decisions. He smiled. But like I said, just theoretical. I drove home that night with my hands tight on the steering wheel. Trevor was worried about my mental capacity, or more accurately, he was planting seeds about my mental capacity. The third red flag came 3 weeks ago. I was having lunch with my attorney, Donald Pressman, at a country club in Atherton. We'd known each other for 30 years. Halfway through our steaks, he leaned forward with a concerned expression. "Robert, I got an interesting call yesterday." "Oh?" "From your grandson, Trevor." Donald dabbed his mouth with his napkin. He wanted to know about the process for having someone declared mentally incompetent. Said he was worried about you. Mentioned you'd been forgetting things, making strange financial decisions. My blood went cold. I haven't forgotten a damn thing, and you know it. I know. That's why I'm telling you. Donald's voice was quiet. He also asked about your will. Wanted to know if you'd made any recent changes, who the executors were, what kind of oversight existed. What did you tell him? That I couldn't discuss your private affairs. But Robert, he paused. I've seen this before. Family members getting impatient, wanting to know when and how much they're getting. Usually, it's just greed. Sometimes it's worse. I thanked Donald and left the club. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, watching golfers on the course, trying to decide if I was being paranoid or if my favorite grandson was planning something terrible. That evening, I did something I'm not proud of. I called an old friend from my army days who'd gone into private security. Within 48 hours, I had a complete background check on Trevor. The report made my stomach turn. Trevor's startup was dying, not struggling, dying. He'd burned through $12 million in venture capital in 3 years, with nothing to show for it. His co-founder had quit 6 months ago, citing Trevor's erratic behavior and poor decisions. He'd maxed out 4 credit cards, taken out a second mortgage on his condo, and borrowed $200,000 from private lenders at 18% interest. He was drowning. And he'd been visiting me, his rich grandfather, every single week for months. The report also included something else. Security camera footage from outside his apartment building. Trevor with a woman I didn't recognize. They were arguing. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could read her body language. She was furious. She pointed at him, then at a car nearby. The report identified her as Vanessa Chen, one of the private lenders. She was known for being aggressive about collections. I understood then, Trevor wasn't just in debt. He was desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. I made a decision. I would test him. 2 weeks ago, I called Trevor and told him I wanted to throw a retirement party. Nothing huge, maybe 30 people. Close friends, some former colleagues, family. I'd rent out the private room at Morton's Steakhouse in San Jose, the place where I'd closed my first major deal 40 years ago. I asked him to help me plan it. He was thrilled, too thrilled. Over the next 2 weeks, Trevor threw himself into the planning. He insisted on handling everything. The guest list, the menu, the seating arrangements. He even hired the bartender, a guy he knew from some networking event. I let him do it. I wanted to see what he would do. I also made some preparations of my own. I called Donald and had him update my will. Everything was going to charity. Well, almost everything. I was setting up a trust for my daughter, Lisa, with Donald as the trustee. She'd be taken care of for life. Trevor would get nothing. I didn't sign it yet, but I had it ready. I also called that security friend again. I asked him to install a small camera in my watch, something that could record video and audio without anyone knowing. He delivered it 3 days before the party. The night of my retirement celebration arrived. I put on my best suit, the navy one Sarah had picked out for me before she died. I looked at myself in the mirror. 74 years old, gray hair, deep lines around my eyes, but still standing straight, still sharp. I touched the watch on my wrist. The tiny camera was recording. When I arrived at Morton's, the private room was already full of people. Friends from the medical device world, a couple of professors from Stanford who'd consulted for my company, neighbors, and Lisa, who'd flown in from Seattle with her husband Mark. Trevor was at the bar, talking to the bartender he'd hired. When he saw me, his face lit up. "Grandpa!" He crossed the room and hugged me. "This is your night. Everything's perfect." And it was perfect. The steaks were incredible. The wine flowed freely, and person after person stood up to toast my career. Lisa gave a beautiful speech about how proud she was. How Mom would have been proud too. I felt tears in my eyes. Around 9 o'clock, Trevor stood up with a glass of bourbon in his hand. "I want to say something," he announced. The room quieted. "My grandfather is the most brilliant man I've ever known. He built something from nothing. He saved lives with his innovations. And more importantly, he's been there for me my entire life." His voice cracked slightly. "Grandpa, I love you, and I hope I can make you as proud of me as I am of you." Everyone applauded. I stood and hugged him. He felt thin in my arms. "Fragile. Let me get you a drink," he said. "Your favorite. Blanton's. Neat. You're a good boy, Trevor." He went to the bar. I watched him carefully. The bartender poured the bourbon into a crystal glass. Trevor said something to him, laughed, then turned back toward me. But as he walked, his body blocked the glass from my view for just a moment. His right hand moved, quick as a blink. Something dropped into the bourbon. My heart started pounding. Trevor set the glass down in front of me. "To you, Grandpa." I looked at the bourbon. Golden, perfect, poisoned. I'd been right. He was actually going to do it. I felt a strange calm settle over me. This was the moment I'd been preparing for, even if I hadn't wanted to believe it would come. "Give me just a second," I said. "I need to visit the restroom before we toast." "Of course." I walked toward the back of the restaurant, past the bar, but I didn't go to the restroom. I circled back and positioned myself where I could see our table. Trevor was on his phone, typing frantically. His expression was tight, anxious. I watched as Mark, my son-in-law, stood up from his seat and walked over to say something to Trevor. They talked for a moment. Mark gestured to the bar, clearly asking if he could get a refill. Trevor nodded, distracted by his phone. This was it. This was my chance. I walked back to the table quickly. Mark had left his own bourbon sitting right next to mine. Both glasses were crystal, both filled with amber liquid. In the dim candlelight, they were nearly identical. I switched them. My poisoned glass went in front of Mark's seat. Mark's clean glass stayed in front of mine. Then I sat down and waited. Trevor looked up from his phone. He saw me sitting there, the bourbon in front of me. He smiled. Mark came back from the bar with a fresh glass and sat down. He didn't notice that his old glass, the poisoned one, was now in front of him. "All right," I said, standing up. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. You've made an old man very happy." Everyone raised their glasses. "Particularly, I want to thank my grandson, Trevor, who organized this whole thing. Trevor, you've been like a son to me these past couple years. I appreciate you more than you know." Trevor's eyes were locked on my glass. On the bourbon I was about to drink. "To family," I said. "To the future. And to second chances." I brought the glass to my lips and took a sip. Clean bourbon, smooth, perfect. Trevor visibly relaxed. His shoulders dropped, his jaw unclenched. Whatever he'd put in that glass, he thought I'd just drunk it. I watched him over the rim of my glass. Mark picked up his bourbon, the poisoned one, and took a large drink. For a few minutes, nothing happened. People mingled, dessert arrived, and coffee was poured. I kept watching Mark. He was talking to one of my former colleagues, laughing about something. Then his face changed. He stopped mid-sentence. His hand went to his stomach. "Mark?" Lisa touched his arm. "Honey, are you okay?" I feel." He stood up suddenly, stumbling. "Something's wrong." His legs buckled. He grabbed the table for support, but his knees gave out and he collapsed onto the floor. Lisa screamed. Everyone rushed over. I stayed in my seat, watching Trevor. His face had gone white, completely white. He stared at Mark's convulsing body on the floor, then looked at me. At the bourbon glass in my hand, I smiled at him. Just slightly. His eyes went wide. He understood. "Call 911, someone was shouting. "Is anyone here a doctor?" One of my former colleagues, a cardiovascular surgeon, was already kneeling beside Mark, checking his pulse. His heart rate's through the roof, pupils dilated. "This looks like some kind of poisoning." Trevor backed away from the table, back toward the door. I stood up slowly and walked toward him. He froze. "Trevor," I said quietly, so only he could hear me. "Where are you going?" "To E. I don't." His voice was shaking. "I need air. You need to stay right here." I grabbed his arm. "The police are going to want to talk to everyone. Let go of me." He tried to pull away, but I held on tight. 43 years of physical therapy on patients had kept my grip strong. "Grandpa, please." The paramedics arrived within 7 minutes. They loaded Mark onto a stretcher, Lisa crying beside him. As they wheeled him past us, Mark's eyes rolled back in his head. He was barely conscious. The police came next. A detective named Sarah Morrison took statements from everyone in the room. When she got to me, I told her exactly what I'd seen. "Detective, I need to show you something." I held up my wrist. "This watch has a camera. It's been recording all evening." Her eyebrows shot up. "Sir, are you saying?" "I'm saying someone put something in my drink tonight. And I switched glasses with my son-in-law. It was meant for me." Trevor had been standing across the room, trying to look calm. When he heard me say that, he bolted for the door. He didn't make it far. 2 uniformed officers grabbed him in the parking lot. They brought him back inside in handcuffs. "I didn't do anything," he was yelling now, all composure gone. "He's crazy. He's old and confused and making things up." Detective Morrison looked at me. "Can I see that recording, Mr. Mitchell?" I handed her my watch. She pressed a few buttons, and there it was on the small screen. Crystal clear footage of Trevor dropping something into my bourbon glass. His hand reaching into his pocket. The quick movement, the tiny capsule falling into the liquid. "No," Trevor's voice broke. "No, no, no. Grandpa, please." "I can explain." "Explain what?" I asked. "Explain how you've been visiting me every week, checking on my mental state, asking my lawyer about having me declared incompetent. Explain how you're $8 million in debt and saw me as your way out." Lisa had come back inside, her face stained with tears. "Trevor? What is he talking about?" "Mom, I didn't. This isn't." Detective Morrison put a hand on his shoulder. "Trevor Mitchell, you're under arrest for attempted murder. You have the right to remain silent." They took him away. Lisa collapsed into a chair, sobbing. I sat down beside her and put my arm around her. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry you had to see this." "Why?" She could barely get the word out. "Why would he do this?" "Money. Desperation. I don't know." I squeezed her shoulder. "But Mark's going to be okay. The doctors caught it in time. At the hospital, they pumped Mark's stomach and gave him activated charcoal. The substance Trevor had used was a concentrated beta blocker, enough to cause cardiac arrest in someone with no tolerance. Mark would survive, but it had been close. Too close. Trevor's trial happened 4 months later. The evidence was overwhelming. The camera footage, the bartender's testimony that Trevor had provided the capsule and told him it was just a supplement for my grandpa's heart. Trevor's financial records, showing his desperation, and Mark's toxicology report all painted a clear picture. Trevor's defense attorney tried to argue diminished capacity due to stress, but it didn't work. The prosecution presented evidence that Trevor had been researching untraceable poisons for 6 months. He'd ordered the beta blocker from an overseas pharmacy. He'd planned this. In his victim impact statement, Mark said something that stuck with me. "I almost died because someone thought an old man's money was worth more than a human life." Robert Mitchell is one of the most brilliant, kind, and generous people I've ever known. The fact that his own grandson saw him as nothing more than a bank account breaks my heart. When it was my turn to speak, I looked at Trevor. He was thin, pale, broken. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Trevor," I said, "I loved you. I would have helped you if you'd just asked. If you'd been honest about your problems, I would have given you the money. Not all of it, but enough to start over. Enough to build something real." My voice cracked. "Instead, you chose this. You chose to see me as an obstacle instead of family. That's the real tragedy here." The judge sentenced him to 20 years. After the trial, I sat down with Lisa. "I'm changing my will," I told her. "I'm setting up a trust for you with Donald as the trustee. You'll never have to worry about money." "Dad, I don't want it." "It's not about want. It's about making sure you're taken care of. It's what your mother would have wanted." She was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't see what was happening. I should have known." "You couldn't have known. Trevor was very good at hiding it." I took her hand. "But I need you to promise me something. Promise me you'll let people help you. Don't make the mistake I made." "What mistake?" "I spent 43 years building a company and neglecting the people I loved. Your mother used to beg me to slow down, spend more time with you, with her. I always said later, after this deal, after this launch. Later. I wiped my eyes. There is no later, Lisa. There's only now. Don't forget that. She hugged me, and we both cried. 6 months after Trevor's sentencing, I did something I'd been thinking about for a long time. I used $40 million of the $72 million to establish the Sarah Mitchell Foundation for Financial Literacy and Mental Health. The foundation provides free counseling and financial education to young entrepreneurs who are struggling. We help people before they get desperate, before they make the kind of choices Trevor made. I hired a small staff to run it, including a young woman named Jennifer who'd gone bankrupt with her first startup and spent 3 years rebuilding her life. She understood what it was like to feel trapped, to feel like there was no way out except something terrible. We're not just giving people money, Jennifer said at our first board meeting. We're giving them options. We're giving them hope. The foundation also funds research into the unique mental health challenges faced by entrepreneurs. The isolation, the pressure, the constant fear of failure. We work with universities to develop better support systems, better safety nets. Every month, I visit the foundation office. I meet the people we're helping. I hear their stories. Some of them remind me of Trevor, and it breaks my heart every time. But I'm glad we're there. I'm glad we can catch them before they fall too far. Lisa visits me every other week now. She brings her kids, my other grandchildren. We have dinner, we play board games, we talk about their lives. Real conversations, not the performative visits Trevor used to do. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that moment in the restaurant. The moment I switched the glasses. I wonder if I should have switched them with Trevor's glass instead. If I should have let him drink his own poison. But then I remember Mark convulsing on the floor, Lisa's screams, and I know I made the right choice. Trevor needed to face justice, not death. He needed to understand what he'd done. And maybe 20 years from now when he gets out, he'll be a different person. Maybe the foundation can help him too. I'm 75 now. My daughter wants me to move closer to Seattle, but I like my house in Palo Alto. It's full of memories, good and bad. Besides, I have work to do. The foundation is growing. We're helping more people every month. Last week, I got a letter from Trevor. It was the first time he'd written to me since the trial. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten, tear-stained in places. He apologized. He explained how the debt had consumed him, how he'd convinced himself that I was going to die soon anyway, that he was just speeding up the inevitable. He talked about the therapy he was receiving in prison, the medication for anxiety and depression he'd been refusing for years. I see now what I became, he wrote. I see the monster I turned into. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't forgive myself. But I want you to know that every day I think about what I did to you, to Mark, to Mom. And every day I promise myself that if I ever get out of here, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends. I read that letter 5 times. Then I wrote back. I told him I was proud that he was getting help. I told him that forgiveness is a process, not a moment. I told him about the foundation, about how we're helping people like him. And I told him that when he gets out, if he's serious about making amends, there might be a place for him there. Not handling money, never handling money, but maybe talking to young entrepreneurs about what he went through. Being a cautionary tale, helping others avoid his mistakes. I don't know if he'll take me up on it. I don't know if I'll even be alive in 20 years. But I want him to have hope. Even after everything he did, he's still my grandson. He's still family. Sarah used to say that the measure of a person isn't their worst moment. It's what they do after, how they grow, how they change. I'm choosing to believe she was right. Tonight, I'm sitting in my study, the same room where I first noticed Trevor looking at my estate planning documents. Outside, the sun is setting over the hills. I have a glass of bourbon in my hand, Blanton's, neat, just the way I like it. And this time, I know exactly what's in it.